Have we entered the new age of comic book releases? Is the Rippaverse onto something in a way Eric July has released these books? I Some number one was released, I want to say around this same time last year. I'll have to look at my order and see exactly when I received my book. And initially, I thought, man, a new comic book coming out with 90, was it 96 pages or 98 pages that first I Some? I'll have to crack it back open and look and see. And realistically, it was like all comic book. I think there was one ad, and if I'm not mistaken, that one ad was from his wife's company. I'm not mad at that at all. Some people took issue with that. That doesn't bother me. So it was really filling. There could have been more to it. The story, as some have pointed out, lacked detail. For me, it wasn't that big of an issue because it drew me in, made me want to read more. I'm not going to rehash that. I remember when Netflix first started streaming and streaming their own TV shows. Now, originally, I thought, okay, Netflix is streaming TV shows. They're probably going to do, maybe one episode, this day and maybe another episode the next week at the same time. Similar to the way TV shows are traditionally run. I thought maybe they'll be released at a certain time. But then Netflix did something that I did not expect. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't expect it. All the episodes dropped at once. And at first, I was in shock slightly because I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this and then I'm going to be done. Like, I don't know if I like this. But then I started watching, and I can't remember what the first Netflix original series was that I watched. But I remember watching this thing and I binge watched. And I was like, oh, I actually believe I enjoy this much better than waiting. Now, I won't say that I'm against waiting for a show to be released because I've watched Mandalorian and it didn't really bother me that I had to wait the next week to see the new episode. I've been watching some things on Apple TV Plus. They have some good shows. They have one show called Silo that I've been watching, and that show has definitely pulled me in. I think it's a very good show. And I'm trying to think, there's another streaming service that releases their content the same way, but it eludes me. Anyway, Netflix did something different, shook up the game a little bit. Even just streaming in general shook up the game a little bit because it was something unexpected. I mean, Netflix had been shaking up the game since its creation, right? It shook up the DVD rental game. And then, of course, video game rentals kind of got into the same thing. I'm not gonna get into that. They did something different. It was a shock to the system. It was unexpected. I didn't know if I was going to like it. And then I was like, oh, this is rather enjoyable. So in that same vein, I think the way I Some number one and I Some number two is being released might actually be a better model. And here's why I say that. Typically, what is a comic book? I can't even remember. I'm going to grab one of my comic books just to see how many pages is the typical comic book, because if I remember correctly, most comic books on average, I want to say is about maybe 26, 30 pages. So this doesn't say exactly. And this is a book I haven't read yet. This is that, I believe I showed this last time, Hardware and Icon. And this is number 2. I didn't even pick up number 1, so I may have to get number 1 if I enjoy this. I don't mind picking up a story in the middle. I'm kind of weird like that. But anyway, just looking through it, it's about, I would say a good 26 pages, right? So 26, 30 pages. Okay, so I Some number 1, 98 pages, I think it was. Number 2 is going to be 100 something pages. I might have those numbers slightly off. So if you break that down, you could break that down into 3 or 4 books. So you think if you released, let's say, 4 books every 2 months, I think if you released a book every 2 months, that's a decent release schedule. Not the greatest, but I think that's actually good. Now, I would prefer to get my comic books more frequently, but I realize that the comic book being released in this way, large books once a year, and now this is what you have to think of as well. Once this universe is built out, and once there's more characters, and once there's more comic books, you're going to get several releases a year of pretty big comic books, graphic novels, pretty much 90 to 100 something pages, and maybe even more. Who knows where this thing goes? And what happens when you start intermingling stories with different characters? This could get really interesting. And as Eric July builds up his the number of people working for or contracting, let's say contracting for Rippaverse, right? Different artists, colorists, writers, and more stories are being cranked out. That's a lot of comic book. That's a lot of comic book reading, depending on how many characters and how many books are put out. So this might actually be a winning strategy. And maybe it actually helps out the artists and the writers to space things out. If you have several different artists and writers, like let's say if or let's say if the Rippaverse had, let's see who he has. He has Bloodruth, which I don't know much about yet. I guess we'll find out in ISOM number 2, Yaira, Alpha Core, ISOM, and there's a character that Chuck Dixon is working on, an original character. So that's what, 5, and then I can't remember. I don't know why this eluded me. I can't remember the name of the characters at the ending of ISOM number 1. So that's a potential of 7 comic books, right? So that's a potential of 7 months worth of 90 to 100 plus page comic books. 7 months. That's a lot of comic books. Now, this is what I'm thinking, because I'm thinking if I was Eric July, how does this work as a businessman? So I'm thinking to myself, man, if he had a $2 to $3 million, or let's say a $1 to $3 million campaign for every book, 7 months, and that's just saying going with 7 books potentially. Yo, this could be a big deal, bringing in a whole bunch of money. And now let's say he gets even more books. This universe gets bigger. This style of comic book being much longer might be a new and winning strategy. I'm not saying everybody has to go this route, much like the streaming services. Some release all episodes at once, and some do week-to-week releases, like has been done traditionally. But this might be a new winning strategy, so everybody doesn't have to follow the same exact mold. That's what I like about the independent space. You don't have to follow the same exact mold that everyone else used to get to wherever it is they are at in their carved out comic book space, whatever that carved out space is. I like that because there's something for everyone. Like I said, I would much rather more frequent releases, because once I get interested in something, I just want to get as much as I can. But to some degree, sometimes you get too much, kind of like a food that you like. Once you eat it so much, it's like, oh, I've had too much. I don't really like it anymore. So maybe this is actually a good strategy. You give people just enough to want more. And then when they get that, that thing they've been craving, it's like, oh, that's satisfying. I can't wait till my next fix. That's kind of what comic books have been like for me. And so, again, this might be a winning strategy for him. I'm not saying this is for everyone, but from a business perspective and looking at my excitement about this book, and not everyone's excited. I'm not saying that the way I feel about this is the way everyone feels, but some people do join me in this feeling of excitement, especially at getting, like, I'm excited to get 100-page book and soak up every page and see what happens. I'm hoping there's more to the story given an ISOM number 2, but however much is given, as long as there's some good art and a compelling story, I think this book will be okay. So let's look at the state of the Rippaverse, namely ISOM number 2 campaign, and see where it's at. So ISOM number 2 campaign, as it stands right now, it is at $1.67 million. The campaign ends August 27th. I believe he will actually reach, at least, in my humble opinion, at least $2 million before August 27th. I don't know if ISOM number 2 will reach that $3.7 million mark that the first book did, but I think $2 million, I think, is a safe bet. So also what I wanted to look at while we are here on the Rippaverse page is some of this ISOM number 2 fan art submissions. Oh, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong page. And I also, one of my commenters, I wish I remembered your name, I want to give you a shout out. So I used some fan art in my last thumbnail, and I didn't give a shout out to the fan art that I used, and somebody commented on my video and brought that up, and I just wanted to say that's actually a good idea, and I actually should have done that. So I might use some of this fan art. Let's see. I think I'm gonna use. Let's look through the fan art first and see, all of these submissions. This first one from Kurt Parker. Okay, I see what you're doing there. Now, what I really like, I'm gonna tell you, I really like this. This is Pitch Comics Arts, and it's a black and white, penciled and inked frame of ISOM, like an action pose. I think that's Yaira in the background. Yo, I like this. I can only imagine how good this would look if and when it got painted. So the next one we have is artist Arnold Fuchsia. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And this looks more like I want to say it's painted. This one here on the right-hand side, I think it's more of a painted canvas. I don't know what you really call it. Instead of just, coloring it in, color pencils or however it's done. I think this is painted. That's what it looks like, but I could be mistaken. And then we have this one on just scrolling down, one on the left, one by Dylan R. Fagan. I would say this is probably more like cartoon art, which, look, I like cartoon art. I think some of the panels on ISOM number 1 were more simple and had a more cartoon art feel. And I actually like that. Sometimes I like more detailed art, sort of like a Jim Lee. But then sometimes I do like my more simple art. It's kind of attractive in a certain way. It draws you in, and the art is good. Not too many details that you get lost in the picture, but you can see what the artist is trying to, the thought that the artist is trying to convey, and whatever it is that has been penciled. You have this next one. It looks like ISOM punched Yaira through this brick wall, and it's by Jonah Sweet. This is a pretty good one. I like the way he colored ISOM in the background to give like that depth of feel, to give you the feeling that ISOM is farther away than Yaira is, and the colors are slightly different. so that Yaira pops and Isam stays more in the background. I like that. This one on the right is kind of, again, I would say the more cartoon style, less detail, and I guess more pulling you into what the artist is trying to convey, which again, that works. That works. And that's by Mel Ford. And now you have one down here. Now this black and white, I really like. It looks like he penciled this and shaded it. This is from Skunk Artworks, skunk_artworks. Pretty good picture. I gotta say, I really like that. I can imagine this would be a good piece for a cover. And we have Keir Covington, and it looks like Isam and whatever the new character is that he's battling in the what is it, the trailer for Isam #2. Not exactly sure what the name of this character is, but good art, penciled and inked, and I like the dark background. I like the side profile of faces. Back when I used to draw, this was one of my favorite things to do for me because it was one of the easiest things to do. Drawing is not easy, so I have respect for all of these artists that have submitted their work. Now you have Art. I don't know if that's supposed to be pronounced Art Zero. It's a shot of Isam and Yaira kind of busting out. Looks like it looks like the moon in the background, or maybe some kind of plasma blast from Yaira. Not exactly sure what's going on. It's an action piece. I like it. And now you have Xavier Santos, this picture of Yaira. The colors are pretty good. Look, if there's one thing I definitely do respect about these artists, when an artist actually colors in his own work, colors, even if you are a really great artist, colors are not easy. At least for someone like me who is not as skilled as these dudes, because you can really mess up a good picture with bad colors. And I learned this just mimicking other pictures that I saw, like drawing Spider-Man, or I drew out a poster of the Wildcats and I tried to color it in myself with color pencils, and I did a decent job, but it was better just penciled before I started coloring it in. So this picture of Yaira from Xavier Santos, kudos. And here's another black and white panel, pencils, and it looks like, I don't know if that's just darker shaded pencils or like moderately inked. It might be penciled and moderately inked. Bill Holloway, and it's Isam. Seems like he's busting out of this brick wall. And I like the depth of field that he created with Isam busting out of what looks like either brick wall window, and you kind of see the ground beneath him, and you kind of get the perspective of how far up he is. Not that far up, but you get that perspective. I like it. And now this picture of Bloodruth. That's a character I'm really interested to see what is actually going on, because we don't know much about Bloodruth yet. And this artist is Matt Chambers. Again, the colors. Bro, I give it to you. I could not do this. I personally could not do this. And now you have another Bloodruth. This seems to be a popular character right now. And this is by Philip Space. And another good one. You got Yaira there in the background. This is a very, very, very good picture, in my humble opinion. I like the perspective of Bloodruth, the way she's standing. You kind of get the depth of field with Yaira being in the background. It looks like, I don't know if it's rubble or like rubble going into some kind of ruin of some sort. Now you got this other artist, and this is Shoujo Flow. I'm not sure if this is penciled and then like maybe filled in some kind of software, but I like it. It kind of has a CGI / semi-realistic feel to it. I think it's pretty good. And now you have this artist on the right, Roberto Viacava. Forgive me if I did not pronounce your name correctly. Here's what I like about different people's perspective on art and what they do. This gives a little bit of a darker feel. It's like in between detail and not much detail, and it looks like it's painted, but it's good because it gives you a little bit of a menacing feel, like Isom just got done doing some damage and he has this face painted in the background. I like it. And the last artist we have is Pluto Blue. And this is, again, another panel that has more of a, I would say more of a cartoon feel, more than a comic book panel feel. But that's just, again, that's just my humble opinion. All good art. Now, the thing you might realize is some of these artists, in my humble opinion, are better than others. Some of these pictures I prefer. But see, art is in some ways very subjective. What I like, someone else might not like. Like I think right now, so this is what I plan on doing. These are the pieces I will use in my thumbnail. Philip Space, who drew Bloodruth and Yaira in the background. I'm probably going to use that one. And let's see, I got to use another one that's colored. I wanted to get one of Isom. I think I might use that one, and maybe, so I'll use that one for Bloodruth. I'll use Dylan R. Fagan's art of Isom, and I will use Xavier Santos' picture of Yaira. Those are the ones I'll use. So that is some of the fan art that's been submitted. I don't know if there's going to be more. I don't know if maybe these are the finalists. I have my thoughts, but I'll see what happens. Yo, I'm excited for Eric July to find some more artists and to use the artwork from some of these artists in future Rippaverse comic books. Hopefully this buds into the resurrection of new artists. Hopefully he discovers some great talent. I hope he gets some great new writers. I hope a lot of good things come out of this. So also what I was doing today is I was kind of lightly looking through what Image, Marvel, and DC have to offer. These I've never really read Dark Horse comics like that, or IDW. It just didn't interest me. Not that they're not good. They just weren't my thing. So I always paid more attention to Marvel, DC, and Image. Those are just the content houses I personally like. That doesn't mean they're the greatest. They're just the content houses I like. So in Image Comics, you have Aphrodite, the complete oversized hardcover, Capra number 44, Hell to Pay number 6, Indigo Children number 4. I tell you what I do like about Image Comics is you have a lot of independent creations, and I do like the fact that Image Comics kind of works out that way. I'm not going to read through all of these. That was just some of the top ones that are coming out. Nothing here personally that interests me just off first glance. Look, that's how I am. I go into a comic book store. What grabs me first is that cover. If there is at least a compelling piece of artwork on the cover, I might pick the book up, thumb through it, and maybe see what it's about and read it. But none of these right now really grab my attention. Now, going over to Marvel, let's see what Marvel has going on, because I haven't really looked at many Marvel comics lately. So you got Carnage Reigns Omega number 1. That doesn't really interest me. X-Men Before the Fall, Heralds of Apocalypse number 1. X-Men is so hard for me to keep up with, as much as they have always been one of my favorite comic book teams. They just have so many storylines running together and so many different things going on that it makes me hard to keep up with and continue buying X-Men comic books. I bought a few years ago, I started reading X-Men. Was it X-Men Blue. I think it was X-Men Blue. And I enjoyed it. And X-Men Gold. I think those were the two runs that I was reading. And I liked it. And I think there was also a reboot. I might have a few issues of Uncanny X-Men that were decent. Avengers Beyond number 44. Again, cover doesn't really grab me. Amazing Spider-Man facsimile edition, number 122. I guess this is a recreation of an older Spider-Man book, I believe. Storm number 2. The art looks interesting. Doesn't necessarily grab me right out the gate. Definitely looks interesting. And these are just their newest releases. So I'm sure they got a lot more things going on. I'm just kind of looking through. It's kind of like a state of comic books, what's going on. And let's look at DC and let's go comics. Let's look at their latest comic books. Let's see. Let's go ahead and block that. Batman, the Brave and the Bold, number 2. Now, here's where I'd say covers get slightly deceptive. I've had Batman covers that did not grab me, but because Batman for me is typically, not always, but typically a decent book, I've picked up the book, opened and thumbed through and thought, yeah, I'm definitely buying this. So even though this Batman, the Brave and the Bold doesn't necessarily grab me as far as the cover, might be something interesting to pick up. And I know it's hypocritical because I just said if the cover doesn't really grab me, I don't pick up the book, but I make an exception for Batman. I'm not going to lie. City Boy number 2 doesn't really look interesting to me. The Riddler Year 1 number 5, that might actually be a compelling storyline. And we got new this week. We have Icon versus Hardware number 3. Again, I showed you number 2 that I have, and I still haven't read it. I need to go ahead and start reading that. But anyway, just some comic books that are out right now. Not really a theme per se for my video today. I just wanted to discuss some things. I was thinking about the release of iSome Books and how Eric July is rolling out those releases, what I thought about those releases, how I feel about them being released and the way they are. It's different. It's definitely different. It's not going to be something that everyone likes, but he might be onto something that leads to something really big in the future.